Good morning. You know, just because I want to make sure that it happens, I want to make sure that as you're welcomed into Rise and Shine Sundays, my name is Jamie Rich. And one of the things that I so enjoy about doing a live show is you never know exactly what's going to be happening from one nanosecond to the next. One thing that you set up one week could be something that just doesn't work this week. So, welcome and happy Easter to those of you who celebrate. Um, we are here in Rise and Shine Sundays where we're waking up to what's emerging. This particular week, we're going to be focusing on something that we really do every day, right? No matter what you do in your day, is that you're constantly making decisions. Sometimes they're little decisions, but they could be, what email am I going to respond to? What's happening in my day? What are the little simple decisions that we need to make in our life? But you're not doing anything wrong. But we want to actually ask you to consider that sometimes the decisions that you make for yourself have an impact far beyond the present moment. And what we're doing is, as we always do in Rise and Shine Sundays, is to invite you into a conversation about a central question to sort of see what kind of emerges from the discussion around the particular subject. This again, um, sometimes things aren't working the way they're supposed to. Um, and sometimes the decisions that you put out there, but we're asking people this week, what are the full impacts of your decisions? Um, and that's where we're going to be focusing on this week's edition of Rise and Shine Sundays, right? We want to be able to talk a little bit about how the process of a simple decision that you make for yourself can actually have really deep and profound impact across the board. And with us, as always, we have a round table of discussion. And I can already tell when we switch to the round table, some of us are still just joining in on this round table. There we are.
Love that.
I want to do this. Can I do something really quick? And I don't mean to begin a program where it's always about humor, but sometimes, like I said, when you're working live, there are things that just simply emerge. So happy Easter again to everyone. Happy Easter to my fellow panelists. And I'm so glad that you have all made the decision to be with us on this particular Sunday morning for this particular conversation. Um, last Sunday when we were talking, one of the things that kind of struck was this whole idea about how people do make decisions. Would you like to set the tone for us while we're having this discussion? May I toss that responsibility to you?
Of course. Well, it's very interesting because decisions are literally things we've been making since we were born, right?
Mhm.
And there's a quote. Oh my gosh, what I'm gonna mess it up because it's like one of the ones I try to remember. But it's a quote from the Renaissance Man. It's the movie The Renaissance Man with Danny DeVito, right? And one of the quotes in there, they talk about Shakespeare, and this is why I love it so much. But one of the quotes in there is like, "Every decision that I make got me to where I am today." And a lot of times we don't think about or give credit to the decisions that we made, whether good or bad at the time, right? To where we actually are today. And
Mhm.
so I think sometimes we just tend to forget how we got here and that we're always going to be making decisions, right? I think
Right,
the judgment comes, I feel, from other people telling me it's a good decision or a bad decision based off of
correct,
their experience, right? So,
correct.
and and everyone I'm sure knows what that feels like when someone's like, "Well, why don't you do this?" And it's a interesting place to be when you get to the point where when someone says that or they say you need this or you should do this. Those are my favorite things when people say it to me for real. Because I go, "Oh, okay. Well, tell me why I need that."
Well, there are so many things alive that come to mind when we're talking about the decision-making process, right? And again, I want to pass on my apologies because sometimes I had made all the decisions to have everything set up correctly. Was there an intro? No, not this morning. So I want to kind of make sure I bring us all back into line. Thank you for setting that framework. Ollie, was there something that you could also add in as you're um, joining us on Sunday afternoon, your time, about the decision-making process?
Well, in French, bon après-midi, good afternoon, from Belgium. And I made this decision to be here because it has been already 3 to 5 Sundays that I enjoy so much our discussion, and that each of us is bringing amazing things. So I made the decisions also to go into the nature. I made the decisions to attend an amazing session, but to walk later this afternoon in the nature. Made the decision to reach my dad on the cafe with friends. So lots of decisions to make, and we have only 24 hours a day, except the sleep, of course. We can also decide to not sleep, but it is another topic. But each time that we make a decision, it means that we choose A instead of B, and that means that we have to realize, if I drink 8 cups of coffee, then I will have to face with my body telling me, "Ooh, it's overload, it's too much." And so it's really to realize that each moment we have the choice that goes within. We don't have the choice of what goes from external, but we have the choice how do we respond, or
Right.
from some, sadly, react.
So one of the things again, Ollie, that you've invited us to kind of consider building on what Sang had said is that, there is that binary decision. Am I going to do something in the moment, right? But what we're looking at this particular Sunday is that ripple effect, to borrow a phrase that's sort of circulating around when you do make a decision, it is not always a straight line to the outcome that it will eventually occur, correct? You may be making a decision in the moment to solve a particular problem, but what ends up happening is as that the consequences of that single decision is made, there is this unfolding territory of a whole bunch of different decisions that get made. And there's a delicate balance in making your decisions where you're kind of getting some of that feedback going, because sometimes people are just so overwhelmed about where they could go. Like, I can't make that decision because, this whole gargantuan thing is going to happen sometimes you feel the weight of that decision. So we're inviting people, and we're inviting people in the chat also to speak from your own experience about decisions that you were making that had, if you will, non-straight line impact, right? Like I did this, and this decision happened, but something else really interesting occurred from that. Saying you're smiling, is there something that comes to mind for you?
I feel like it's the story of everyone's life at some point. I think when you're making decisions, there's a lot of things that go into factor, right? Of course, we think about all the external things that go into place. I know, growing when I was raising my kids, it's more, how is this going to affect them, right? What's the domino effect? What's the ripple effect? Um, because I'm raising a human, and so and so it comes down to, I think, going to something that Ollie said. There is the yes or no, but there's also the yes and, right? So knowing that you have a choice. I think a lot of times we grow up thinking we have to do this or this, because I like to eat dessert first, right?
Right,
So, but people, and it's interesting because I will make a choice that fits for me.
right.
And then other people will go, "Why are you eating dessert first?" Because I want to, right? And sometimes that's not enough for people. And they are just adamant that that is the wrong thing. And I think when you're making decisions for yourself, or you're making decisions for other people, sometimes when you're making decisions and you don't know what the ripple effect is going to be on others, that's challenging for sure.
It is.
When you are making decisions for yourself, I always tell people I make decisions um, based on the knowledge, wisdom, and experience that I have at the time.
Correct.
Right. And, people have harped on me about a lot of things that I've done in the past. I admit to all the things I've done in the past, but I get to make this decision for myself. But it's very fascinating. Everybody who wants to judge based on decisions that you make for yourself.
Right.
Go
And
ahead.
those are those ripples. I know there's been a few more people who have joined us this week on Rise and Shine Sundays. We're asking, what are the full impacts of your decisions? We're here in the roundtable. I wanted to bring this comment up to everyone right now. So the words are really important, right? Choice is derived, as Jessica is saying, from to choose, right? Whereas decision is derived from to cut off, right? And that's where our mind is in the moment. When we make that decision to do something, we have cut off, if you will, other possibilities, right? Whether or not whether or not I'm going to respond to the email, or if I'm going to leave a marriage, right? But as good parents know, there are choices that get made and decisions that happen and decisions that have to be made all the time.
Yes.
But we're inviting people to kind of look at the ripple effects of your decision, not to paralyze you. This isn't about, but we recognize that we live in a culture right now that celebrates decisiveness, right? I see you nodding on this, that fast is confident, that slow is uncertain, and that we can't watch the ripples while all this is happening. Does that bring to mind anything for you, Ray?
Yeah, I just love that what Sang was bringing up is that we're conditioned from the start to use I'll call it one-dimensional solutions, the either or, as if that was the, A or B, pick one and be fast about it, and run to the next. But what we're really talking about is multi-dimensional, as Sang has touched on, and Ollie as well, is it's never just about you. It's about everybody else as well as you. So I love the fact that when you say and, you attach and the most recent exploration I was playing with is it's both, either or, both and the person added more. Because it's the ripples that you're referring to, Jamie, is it's once that decision's made, it doesn't stop. There is no boundary. It keeps going. And sometimes it comes back. Sometimes it changes things that change like if you're into science fiction, it changes the whole system dimensionally. So yeah, so I think that's the first shift, is to think in terms of the ripples rather than the either or.
Yeah.
Right. And it's also not about getting it perfect, is it? I mean, so wait, Ollie has a question that he even put in the chat. Do you want to hear? I'll bring it in so that we can see it. Yeah, but what is the full impact, right? We recognize that there are ripples that do get created, but full happens by observing the ripples, does it not?
I'm going to say yes and no.
Okay. Talk more about that.
Because ultimately, when we make a decision, sometimes we're making decisions based off of right now, right? And we're not necessarily thinking about what's going to happen down the line because of this decision.
Correct.
Right. So one of the things I think about is when we're making decisions, are we thinking about, depending, I think it's very situational. Do we actually know what the full effects of a decision could be?
Okay. Yeah. Fair enough. You had a little frown on your face, Ollie. I want to make sure before I went on. Was it something that she said that was a little trigger there?
No, but for me, it's about knowing what time frame do we want to make in account when we decide. Could be small or big decisions, but then there are consequences, few hours, days, weeks, months, years after, and we don't know. So, for instance, I know that if it's so much rainy and cold outside, I might have a walk, but a short walk, because I don't want to be exhausted. I already anticipate that if it's rainy, windy, cold, it will take me more energy to evolve in my walk. And so it means that if I make a walk of 2 hours, I might be really exhausted. And then I realized that I'll not be so energized to participate in this session, for instance. That's a good example, by instance.
Let me try to introduce a word here to see how, and maybe people in the chat want to respond to it as well. Your decision evolves in time. Your decisions evolve in time. I remember, I don't really talk about my own personal experience a lot, but some of you know that at one time in my life, I weighed 321 pounds, right? And I can remember one of the things that people were always asking me was what I didn't eat. And, like if I could only turn my life around, but that meal, like it became so focused, like I get so obsessed at what I was going to have at this one meal, right? But a little thing inside my head said, you know what? You can always eat again.
Right.
You can always eat again. There is going to be the decision that I make right now as far as how I'm going to treat my body isn't just one decision. There is this ripple, but I also am going to allow myself to decide again based on new information. So on one hand, as Ray, I want you to speak to this specifically. Modernity or the world wants to lock us into a decision really quick. Make up your mind, pick something, right? And then stick to it, right? So where did we get that from?
I guess it's what I always refer to as command and control. If you have a rigid structure, you can control stories, you can control processes, you can control people, essentially.
Right.
I just want to refer to a comment that Stacy just made, which is fabulous, about indigenous culture thinking 7 generations before us, 7 generations to come, to show that the ripples are all connected. We're influenced by what came before us of the previous decisions. And one of the key thinking that I think modernity says, don't worry about that. That's not our problem.
Mm-hmm.
But what's coming out is essentially a decision that the world or a country or individuals make about almost anything is going to have some kind of influence / impact on the next generation and the following generation. Yeah. Is the minute we forget that, we create an endless loop of control and repetition, and that's what modernity is about. So I don't know if that answered it, Jamie, but
no. Let's toss this in there. But Stacy's asking a valid question. Can we really know the full impact? Right? The butterfly effect. Go for it, saying it's your moment here.
Well, I was like, what is it? Well, I'm gonna go with something very familiar, right? Like when I chose to have my children. Okay. I chose to have my children. Their dads did not want me to have them, right? I made a choice. I also made a choice and really thinking about full impact. Did I think that we would be here where we are today? No, didn't even think this far. But as I was making decisions along the way, being a parent, being a single mom, raising the children, I wanted their dads to be a part of their life. I wanted that. I was fighting. I would fight hard for them to have it. But it doesn't always work out the way. So then I had to make decisions for my children. Then, I think going off of something that Stacey said, it really hit something there. Because when I think about where I was in the past, different decisions that I wanted to make differently than my own parents, who made different decisions from their parents and so on and so forth, there was somewhere where I had to decide that I didn't want my children to experience all these things that I had, for other kids not to experience the things that I had. By one, I had a dad in the home. I don't have a relationship with my dad, right? My kids did not have their dads in the home. They attempted to have relationships with their dads. Their dads were just different. It didn't allow for that. And I had to make choices and decisions that my children were also, I made sure they were a part of, because this affects them. And I think figuring out when you're making decisions, especially your immediate family, how is it affecting your immediate family? And for me, it was, these are my children. I have to take care of the children first, whatever's going on outside. But I also then teach them all the things how to make decisions, tools and resources. I always tell people there's 3 levels to parenting, 3 little levels to parenting. And one is it's our positions to give people tools and resources to make decisions, to kind of guide them, right? The second thing is for them to use those tools and resources and ask questions and figure those things out, because we've been here before, but we haven't been in their shoes.
Correct.
And then ultimately, which is the hardest thing about us is watching and that this is the ripple effect piece of it, right? As you sit back and I have proud mom parenting moments for sure. And when I sit back and go, did I make the right decision? Did I do this? Did I do that? Do I then feel guilt because I don't have this for my kids? Right. And so really thinking about, did I think about all that when I said, yes, I'm going to have children?
So what you just spoke to saying, again, I'm going to use the term masterclass, is defining what is the pause in your decision-making process, right? If the pause is there to simply paralyze you, right, it's probably not a good pause to make, because we fill ourselves in that pause of self-judgment, worry, what's going to be happening if I make this decision right? But the pause that we're inviting people to do is to look from an observer standpoint to what the ripples are. Yes, we live in a culture that rewards quick decisions, but what we also want to be able to do is to look at that bigger picture where the pause isn't about blaming yourself or saying, what happens if I get this wrong, or how am I going to screw this up, or anything so if the pause that you're dealing with in a decision-making thing is only there to paralyze you, that's not a pause.
Right.
That's that judgment. That's what keeps people from making decisions, because when they want to eliminate, I don't know if this has ever happened to another human being besides me, but sometimes the decision is to shut off those voices inside our head and just pick a solution, right? And what we're inviting you to consider, which Sang was speaking about before, when you were thinking about the pause, you were pausing to say, all right, what are the ramifications? Where is the ripple going to lead to this decision, right? And I will be able to handle that by making a constructive choice in the future, because I'm going to be looking at the ripple effects of my decision as I move forward. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Who's got something alive in this moment?
Well, I will say when we're not really thinking, and I think it all, again, depends on the situational for sure, right?
Absolutely.
I'm sitting here making decisions right now going, okay, what is this going to look like in 6 months if I do this? What am I going to do if I do this for the next 6 months? So there's different levels of decision making for sure. And which one's going to have that ripple effect? Is it going to have something outside of me? Is it for me? Is it something that I changed? And I'm going to go back to something that I've talked about before. So back in September, I decided that I wanted to be more present online. I wanted to get back online. And so the month of October, I said, let me make one change, just one small tweak, right? As we talk about the butterfly effect. So I made a note to sign up for all the co-working classes, to do everything to show up. And I put it on my calendar because I know if it's on my calendar, I'm going to go. So it's about knowing about yourself. I put it on the calendar and I've shown up since October. And I've been to like every soul session Saturday. I've been to everything that I could possibly make it since then. And when I think about at the time, I was making the decision because I knew something had to be different. I wanted something different. I wanted something more, but I didn't know what that more was yet. Yeah. And so then I said, okay, let me keep doing this. And as I kept showing up, I kept getting more confidence, more empowerment, more connection, more conversation that led into other conversations that has led me here to be here with you guys.
Right.
So one tiny decision, sometimes we don't think about when we want to change it just for one thing. What does that look like 4 or 5 months? And I think I would be sitting here right now. Nope, didn't think about it. But I'm like, and that's the other thing. When you're just a wave and just going with the flow like a jellyfish, right. You're right in the ocean. And it's just like, because jellyfish, they're just kind of chilling. They're just going along life.
And who knew when we picked this as a topic, that we would find these different permutations about what decision making is all about,
Right.
right? And that is that allowance. That is, we didn't even talk about what I call them from the movie sliding doors, right? Will this decision open up a whole different set of circumstances that would have led my life in a different direction, right? What again I see being the underpinning to all of this is the power of the pause. And what is it that the pause brings you? To go back to what Jessica invited us to take a look at the beginning, when we choose, and make a decision, we are cutting something else off. And maybe in the moment, that's what exactly a short term decision is all about, right? Well, I
Mhm.
needed to make a decision to pick something, I did it, right? And there is not a ripple, right? But kind of why we've been asking about the full impacts of your decision is to be aware that there are these ripples, right? And that one of the things that you can bring in your journey, no matter what those decisions that you're making are, is that you have that power to choose, to decide, to observe, right? And even if you quote, decided wrong, right? Because, and even if you decided you had a dog that chose to bark at this particular moment, you can use that ripple effect, that pause. Someone else talk for a minute.
He's saying Happy Easter. That's all it is. Well, I want to say I will jump in and say when I think about decision making and how we really don't think about, we may not think about what the ripple effects are. May not look and see, oh, okay, this is what I'm going for. You just know you want to go in this general direction, right? And I think going back to something that you had talked to Ray about the either or and the and, I think growing up it was you couldn't have both, because if you wanted both, you were greedy. And then even now, when I say, I want both, and people are like, well, no, you have to pick one. No, I don't. I want both. If I want both, I can get both because I get to decide that I want both. And then I then will find a way to get both. And I think that we have grown up in such a society. If we think about kindergarten, I always go back to school, right? We go back to kindergarten, we go back to our parents. It was, do you want chocolate or vanilla? Right? Do you want red Kool-Aid or green Kool-Aid? Right? Well, can we mix them? No. Right? Then we had suicide drinks. Remember those, when people would go to the gas station and get all the drinks and they'd call it that. But just different, like the and can sometimes be fulfilling. Now, are there times when we just want this or that? Yes. But I think really owning that you can make those yes and decisions, or no and I will not be doing XYZ either. Right? So you get to use that. And I think people have a tendency to forget that we have that freedom of choice. I feel I'm not big on like American history, and so please don't bash me. But I'm pretty sure that I know everybody may not feel this way right now. I totally get it. But the land of the freedom, right? We have freedom of choice. We have the freedom to make a decision. And that freedom comes with, what we fill our minds with, what we decide, who we surround ourselves with, where do we want to go? What does that more look like for us in that instance? And I think when really it's hard because everybody makes decisions differently. And my favorites are always when you make a decision, again, going back to the beginning, when you're decisive about something that you want to do, or something that you like, or something that you don't like. And all of a sudden, everyone wants to judge and shame you about it. Like, you made a bad decision. You made a good decision. Well, who are you to tell me what decision was good or bad for me?
Yeah, and again, you're speaking to the way in which the world in which we live in wants us to be able to see everything as a binary. You made a decision, now you've got to live with it. I mean, think of all of these parenting messages that you've heard. You're stuck with that.
You made
You
your bed, now you
chose.
gotta lie in it.
Right. If you pick that decision, you're going to be stuck with that the rest of your life. You're going to suffer. We have over emphasized, this whole idea of keeping people frozen and responsible, and not being allowed to choose and choose again. I love, the thinking that you're inviting us to do, saying, is recognizing that it's always not either or, the binary decision, that it's yes and, or it's no and, right? I reserve the right to make a different decision when new information comes back to me in my life. Right? There is power in being able to sort of see the whole field through the possibility lens. Does that make a difference? Because, again, when we thought about this idea as a topic for a discussion, and I was really grateful that Jessica wove back in the power of choice in it, right? Because it's not just the fact that you can make a choice, but you can make a conscious choice, and that you can bring that same sort of context, right, into a culture that just says, well, you're stuck with that, lady. Well, you chose that path for yourself years ago. Or, well, the choices that you make today, you're going to have to live with that choice the rest of your life. And we do that to people to punish and to disempower them, and to humiliate them and make them fearful of choices that they want to make in their life. Yeah, Ollie.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And the external world, try probably to influx our decision, to gaslight us. And for that, we need a pure pause to find our pure pause.
Oh, yeah.
And to really decide what we want to be, what we want to do. That's why powerful questions, I'm in a quest of finding my own silence, my own time, my own powerful questions, so that I'm no more shameful about what I did in the past, because I cannot change the past. I cannot envision the future unless I decide where I want to work with. And so it's all about asking myself a full question. And also, I would like to be more open to joy. I don't know what will be my decisions in the next weeks or month. I need more like to have income right now. But I don't want to have income in the expense of not being joyful. I want to, that's why I made a banner inside of my LinkedIn, open to joy, not open to work. Of course, I'm open to work, but with joy. Because if there is no joy, there is no connection with the heart. I learned a lot about the neuroscience. So connection with the heart and the body is so important. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's great. And, I know that there are people in the chat who are watching this, or people who may be watching this later, who will embrace a concept called neuroplasticity, right? And, it's really important to recognize that concept exists. And, it seems like it was only introduced to us recently with that term, right? To really fully embrace what that is, because, we were told, again, you're going to be stuck with decisions. Well, and if Ollie decides that he wants to then do this, right? Well, you've been conditioned for years. You're never really going to get over that. Saying wanting to do something simple as being able to be more fully present in her online environments. There is not only is there a decision that gets made and a ripple that you can observe and a pause that has been happening, there is actually neuroplasticity there to support you in terms of opening up something new that's possible. Ray, Ray, I want you to be the expert on neuroplasticity. So define it to us and give us 3 examples.
Neuro what?
Yeah.
Not my complete field of expertise or understanding, but I like the idea that we've played with the idea of ripples. So ripples are never static. So what struck me is when somebody's trying to trap you or drag you or punish you or belittle you in a decision, it's because they want to make it static, that nothing else can change because you decided that at this point in your life or whatever. But everything is fluid. It's about the flow. And lots of things can happen. You can learn. You can change your mind, by the way. As Sang has pointed out, it's what you are deciding is good for you, and how it affects others is you may be conscious of it, you may not be, but it's basically it's an open field. And I think that's the big difference is the minute we shift these things, we create new possibilities, what you just said, Jamie. And I think that's so important. The
I'm
possibilities.
Yeah, and I want to toss something else because again, this is Rise and Shine Sundays, and this idea is just coming. So, can neuroplasticity be extended beyond the idea of the impact you can have on the decision? So, let's say that your decision has made a particularly strong impact on someone else. Can that also impact their neuroplasticity? In other words, we talked a little about when we were setting up this episode of the idea of recognizing that our decisions are going to impact other people, right? And if we can take a pause for ourselves to be able to see our ripples, can we in relationship take the pause to observe what's happening about our decisions and how they are impacting other people? Like, can we create, if you will, this opportunity for growth, right? By not demanding what the other person is going through to fit into our paradigm, but to give people a chance to catch up to our choices. Do you understand what I mean? To be able to be fully present with somebody whose life has been impacted by the decisions that you have made.
Mm. Yeah, I think I want to circle back to conversations, right?
Okay.
If you are making decisions and that you know they are impacting others, it and also depends. I feel like the level of relationship that you have with whatever individuals. You get to choose. Going back to choice, you have a choice to. You can have a conversation, especially when you're changing your mind, right? Especially, because when you are changing your mind and it affects others, it's worth having a conversation because otherwise everything just explodes. I think I'm going to say yes, it does extend beyond us for everyone else's neuroplasticity. But we don't know what those full effects are because again, we don't know their experience. And also I want to go back to something else too. Not deciding is deciding. Right? So let's say, someone chooses to have a conversation, but I don't want to have the conversation. I don't want to address the conversation. I don't want to talk about it. If I say I don't want to talk about it, or I'm not ready to talk about it, or I don't talk about it, those are all decisions that I've chosen to make. That may not sit well with other people, right? Also, the decisions I may have made may not also sit well with other people. But perhaps I'm sitting here thinking about what I should be doing,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so people will also then, if they will take that silence. Let's say Ray asked me a question and I haven't answered him for a couple weeks, right? And I've seen Ray, but Ray doesn't bring it up and I don't bring it up. But Ray's probably like going, is this girl going to ever answer my question that I sent to her? He may bring it up every once in a while, but then ultimately I've made a choice not to answer whatever question Ray had. However, I could also go to Ray and say, hey, Ray, I haven't answered your question yet because I've really been thinking about X, Y, and Z. Again, remembering that our decisions, especially if they impact others, you have a choice to have a conversation or not to have a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
You can do both, right? And I think again, everything is situational, and it's looking at what I've always liked to do is the people that are in crisis, like when there's a crisis going on all around, and the person who's the calmest, I'm going to say probably has one of the most serene decision-making skills, but it's so hard for them to make decisive decisions for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because they can do it because it affects all these people and it does all this and it does all that. But then when it comes down to self, and I am one of those people. And so it's very challenging sometimes for me to make decisions for myself because I'm going, well, who's guiding me? Right? Who's guiding me in making this decision when it's me with me?
Right. And that goes back to that again, recognizing the power. I'm going to put my hand here on my heart just anyway, just because it's recognizing the power of the pause.
Mm-hmm.
Who is this decision for? What is my locus of impact? Right? Being fully conscious and recognizing that we are deeply conditioned sometimes, even through not only the culture that we lived in, but the expectations that we have. Like if you're the person who ends up, well, he always makes the decisions. Well, Sang always decides what we do, or we're going to run this, that there's this other patterning of decision making that kicks in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there what we have been experiencing in this particular gathering of Rise and Shine Sundays is what I call the ping pong ball effect, right? Where we can take a central idea, in this case, what are the full impacts of your decisions, right? And when we bring it into the microscope of discussion, there are all these different ping pong perspectives that can happen, right? All of which center around the concept of being conscious to the ripples that are upon you. And also, in the case of what Sang was saying, is wait, this is sometimes really difficult for me to do for myself, because it's easier for me to kind of see how it works for others. And I kind of have I can see that if we make this decision, it'll be good for this, 60% of these people, and the 30% who don't, and the 10% who don't care. That's because we're using that observation skill in the field, right? And what you so beautifully illustrated, which was sometimes we don't know how to be our own guide in those situations, right? Because there isn't anybody else looking at us, right? And again, that goes back to the pause. And if the pause is just simply something that you can do, let me think about this. Do I need to give Ray an answer today?
No.
And I may need to give him that answer later.
Yes.
But I'll know. Okay. Because we've all been conditioned, because Ray demanded to have an answer, right? And I had a good friend who was, told on a Tuesday afternoon that his position was no longer going to be kept, right? And he had to make the decision as to whether or not he was going to accept severance or whatever in the moment. And he said, I can't make this decision right now. I'll get back to you tomorrow. And their jaws dropped. They were like, but, no, you need to make this decision now. And he was like, I will make this decision tomorrow. And to be able to find the power, Ollie, going back to what you were saying from the gaslighting situation, right? To being able to be fully conscious, you get to choose that pause. You had your hand up, Ollie. What's cooking?
I'm really I'm blessed that we have this conversation, because it's also about setting boundaries. And what I was reflecting is that we don't know what happens in each other's life. Sometimes it's not easy to be in Jamie's head, in Ray's head, in Sang's head, and in Ollie's head. But we only know what we share to others, and to some persons we don't know. And it's also about the fact that we having a pause to digest is important, and to realize that I'm learning that sometimes I'm having tears about what's happens in the past, but I cannot change the past. I just can say, okay, I did that. What's going now? What is my choice of action? And so it's really difficult, because as animals, we are animals, but we are humans, so we are probably too much in the past or in the future. The famous quote of Kung Fu Panda: "Yesterday is mystery, tomorrow is yesterday is history, tomorrow is mystery, but today is the present moment." That's why it's called the gift,
Right.
And it's really to realize that we have just this moment to decide. Also, thank you.
You got it. And again, we always get this moment again and again and again and again. Because there's a lot going on in the ping pong, I want to bring in a concept idea. I'm going to make a left turn, because Stacy introduced something several minutes back in the chat that I want to try to go back and recapture. And we were talking about how our decisions impact other people. Because Stacy is the intelligent, powerful woman that she is, she's going to bring in Einstein. And I'm just so grateful to be able to have had a Rise and Shine Sundays where we're going to take a look at something that's a little bit more esoteric, right? That you can the decisions that you make, right? The decisions that you decide to do for yourself can have wonderful impacts to people that you may not be in the field of. I feel like we could do a whole Rise and Shine Sundays about the how things are working in the background for people, because she continues with this. So not only do we impact others, our changes in our mind can also impact them again later. And how I think that shows up, that saying when you become a better person that pauses for yourself to make decisions, you will be more mindful and be able to hold that pause for others when the decisions that you make impact them and you give them the time to catch up.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think one of the things when we're making decisions is also giving other people, like you're talking about, that space, because they don't even know, sometimes they don't even know what that's like to have space to make a decision,
Absolutely.
to not have the pressure on them. And there was something that came up when Ollie was talking about, and I want to bring this here, is about the distinction of making a choice for self when you know others are going to be affected, but when it's your decision to make ultimately for self. Right.
Say that again. Say
Say,
that
like,
again.
for example, let's say we're all on The View, right? This is the big TV show, and I decide I'm going to walk away from the TV show. It's ultimately going to affect the three of you,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I'm making a decision for myself. A lot of times I wouldn't think, let me go consult with Ray, let me go consult with Jamie, let me go consult with Ollie so I can make a decision. When ultimately it's a decision that I want to make for myself. But sometimes I go to other people because it's going to affect them,
Mm-hmm.
right? But sometimes I don't go to them. So there's that level of, again, decision making where does guilt set in? If I know it's going to affect somebody else, am I making this decision for myself? Because a lot of times we are making decisions for the external.
Mm-hmm.
We are, like, what Ray and Jamie and Ollie have talked about. We're conditioned to make decisions based off of everything that's happening around us, which is why it's such a challenging thing for us to go, I want dessert first, right? Because it's against the norm, for one. And two, it's I'm doing something that I want, or I get to do something that even if I decide to step away, right? As a courtesy, yes, I'm going to go and talk to you, but do I have to bring you in that decision making?
Right. And most decision-making frameworks are based in that outcome-focused world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sort of what we're actually and saying is that when you make these decisions, they can actually become inquiry-based, so that it's impact-focused, right? Mm-hmm. And that also gets you out of the paralysis of making decisions, right? Because you can be conscious one moment to the next, to the next, to the next. And if you give yourself that freedom to be able to trust your own self-verification,
Mm-hmm.
what you're doing when you're observing the ripples, and again, I'm going to come back to Ray in a second, just because when you're observing these ripples, right, you're actually looking at the impact of what's happening. And you're using that self-verification to go back to, well, how do I choose to respond to that?
Mm-hmm.
And that mechanism is very different than how most people make their decisions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ray, did you have anything that you...
Yeah, I was actually thinking of two things at the same time.
Oh my gosh.
Imagine that.
Tell us.
Conversations and decision making.
Mm.
So it happens like it's happening now, is that we're being influenced, we're being patterned, we're noticing, we're observing, we're changing, we're shifting all at once. I think what struck me is that what we've really been talking about is how do we actually shift in the way we want to shift by making decisions. And it's by observing, listening, and engaging. So conversations have value, was my first thought.
Mm-hmm.
Even though in more rigid structures, oh, that's a waste of time. You're just having a conversation. What the hell do you do with that? But Sang has pointed out, and so has Ollie, is anything that contributes to
Mm-hmm.
our ability to understand and to act in a different way has value. Mm-hmm. So why would you say conversations are a waste of time and value? It's because it doesn't fit somebody else's mold or process. It's by taking away a choice. So conversations have value. It ties back into the decision making. What if my decision making is improved by having conversations like this? So the conversation is actually connecting in. So conversations connect. decision making is connected whether we recognize it or not. So essentially what we're playing with is multiple elements at the same time that influence how we think, how we behave, how we act, how we decide. So long-winded way of basically saying nothing is as simple as it's trying to be controlled by somebody else. So because that's what Sang has reinforced through this whole conversation, is that it's not static. It's evolving, and there's choice that is made, even though, and as Ollie's pointed out as well, is that sometimes people want to take away that choice.
Yeah. And choice is not indecisiveness. Conscious choice is not indecisiveness. And it's a really important, almost like a mantra that you want to kind of carry into your week sometime, and recognize that as again, when you're in the conscious pause of still observing what's happening, the ripples and the waves, right? And to see them without that judgmental lens, but just simply to allow yourself to be observational about it, when you get to go back and choose again, because what you're doing is you're adding to the value of the decisions that are being made. You can, if you want to, cut people off, and you can do all these wonderful things that the present world teaches us are supposed to be good. I'm going to go make a decision. I'm going to go back to Jessica's definition of it, which is to sever, right? But just we've all been at the behest of the machete of decisions being made in our world, and sometimes you do need to clear the field with your decisions. I'm going to toss this out. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. But again, it's always recognizing that there's that conscious choice to your decisions when you can go in to observe the ripples of what's happening with that consciousness, with that attitude of and I love that. Again, I want to make sure that those of you who are watching and those of you who are watching this later, one of the reasons why I want to keep this conversation as unscripted as possible is because it shows you just what Ray is trying to say. The value of these conversations is the fact that these conversations exist. We're not here to tell you what the prescriptive is. Jamie's 5 different methods of, decision-making success, or Sang's secret sauce of how to make those saucy decisions, that would be disingenuous to the conversations that you want to have. We want to be able to have this be a model for how you can converse and discuss, just in the same way of things that are present for you in your world. Maybe talk about decisions like you were so beautifully saying with your kids, teach them about a conversation about decision making. Do I see the finger kind of inching up? Ollie, was there something you wanted to
Yes.
say?
If I may, I would like
Sure.
to thank you again for having this conversation. And it's really profound because I'm between joy and tears. And we never know persons that are no longer in our lives, whether they are alive or they spread their wings years ago. They still have impact on decisions they made 5, 10, 20 years ago in your life. So it's to realize that even if you are watching this on replay tomorrow, next week, next year, or even in 20 years, the simple fact to realize that our conversation can add value in others' life, and that decisions that someone made in my life still impact me, because I have memories of people that are no longer in this world, but their presence were impacting me. Like, and I'm going to be short, but I was meeting for an evening someone who passed away a few months later, and this person impacted my life because during this evening he shared something really profound, and I attended his funeral also. And so it's realized that every choice we make is impacting us, is impacting also others. And thank you also to remind us, dear Jamie, that we have choice each and every no. We have millions of no's that is successively going. So thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you again always for your shares as well. It seems that we have chosen ourselves here at the end of our time together, and we're so appreciative of being able to share this message with you on the Breakthrough Show Network. As we round the hour, Ray, was there anything else that we wanted to sort of tie up?
Not, I can't think of anything specific, but it's just, to share in Ollie's appreciation that we can have this conversation because of the space and the gift of everyone present, whether you're in chat or listening at a later date. So that connection is beneficial. And I think just becoming aware that we have connected is such a beautiful thing.
Right.
Mhm.
Well, saying that brings the decision then to you as to what anything that you have heard people speak to today that surprised you.
I wouldn't say surprised me, but I will say, because decision making is hard. I think there's a lot of pressure as we grow up to make decisions. Like, even when I think about how sitting around parents and as of little children, it's interesting to hear the things that they teach them and say to them, and then go, oh, how did that play out in adult life for me? Right. And I love that for myself because I will look at that and go, I don't remember saying, and I go, wonder what he's going to think when his parents have said that to him 1,500 times, right? And then, it's like when you meet someone at the gas station who you give them directions and you wonder if they ever make it. Like, you wonder at what the impact of what if this mom and dad are saying the same thing over and over. I always think about things like that because I think about how the things that stuck with me. And so I know for myself when making decisions, now it's just really about me. Right. When before it's, it was about everything else. But I think really truly understanding yourself, I'm always going to go back to self, understanding yourself, your own habits, the way you think, the way you've been taught, the way you don't even like the way you were making decisions in the past. Like you get to choose and change. And it's okay. You don't have to be the same person you were last year. And when people meet you and they're like, oh, you're not the same person. Well, clearly not. You aren't either. Right? Like 20 things have happened in the last 12 months, that kind of shifted for people. So I think going back to having conversations and compassion and empathy but also allowing people space to make decisions and giving them space to make decisions when you see they're struggling or they're having a hard time making it, or what does that look like to support someone through a decision. I think those are kind of some key pieces to think about. And just remember, yes, no, yes, and no, and either or. You get to choose whatever you want.
Right. And I think that goes back again to something that we talk about quite a bit here on Rise and Shine Sundays is when what's emerging, in order for that emergence to really happen, you have to give yourself that conscious pause to allow to see what's there. And you are then able to make the choices based on that self-verified system of what you want to see happen and what you want to see more of in the world, right?
Mhm.
So this week, I guess my invitation for those of you who are listening, those of you who are watching at a later time, is to continue to operate from this idea that there is a full impact of the decisions that you make. And the joy of that is that you get to be able to see the ripples and you get to bring the truth of who you are into the observation of those ripples and to be able to make those decisions and to be with people in a way that you've experienced for yourself as those decisions get played out. So I hope that you decide to join us back here. We're always here on the Breakthrough Show Network every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Coming up next on the Breakthrough Show Network is Spirit Sundays. No, they're not. They're not today.
No, not this time.
It's
Not this
Happy
time.
Easter. It's
Okay,
Happy Easter.
So coming up now
Yeah.
in your world is a pause. And this is the pause that we want you to take. This is a gift from your good friends at Rise and Shine Sundays to take a pause, to be able to have that space in your world, to recognize that you can make decisions, and you can make decisions without succumbing to paralysis when you allow that process of, I have choice. Let's see how this unfolds.
Mhm.
Let's see what's emerging. And again, I hope you will choose to be back with us next week here on the Breakthrough Show Network. For Jamie Rich and for our guests, thank you for being here. To all of you, thank you for your time. Thank you for your contributions. And I'm going to see if yeah, one more thing. What we got?
Ollie.
Ollie.
Give yourself some grace. If you have to make a decision, give yourself some grace and keep shining. You are amazing in this world. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Thank you for that benediction.
If all else fails, eat dessert first.
We'll be back here next week.
That's right.